Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Let's dive deep into Sri Bhagavan's teachings. We'll take up with dialogue number 372. A disciple asked, Harapalation, sobbing voice, joyful tears, etc. are mentioned in Atma Vidya Vilasa and other works. Are these found in Samadhi, or before, or after? The Maharshi replies, all these are the symptoms of exceedingly subtle modes of mind, vrittis. Without duality, they cannot remain. Samadhi is perfect peace, where these cannot find place. After emerging from Samadhi, the remembrance of the state gives rise to these symptoms. In Bhakti Marga, path of devotion, these are precursors to Samadhi. The disciple asked, are they not so in the path of jnana? Sri Bhagavan replies, maybe. There is no definiteness about it. It depends on the nature of the individual. Individuality entirely lost, these cannot find a place. Even the slightest trace of it being present, these symptoms become manifest. Manaka Vajrakar and other saints have spoken of these symptoms. They say tears rush forth involuntarily and irrepressibly. Though aware of tears, they are unable to repress them. I had the same experience when I was staying in Virupaksha cave. The disciple then asked, sleep state is said to be the experience of bliss, yet on recollecting it, the hairs do not stand on end. Why should they do so if the Samadhi state is recollected? The Maharshi replies, Samadhi means sleep in waking state, Jagrat Sushupti. Bliss is overpowering, and the experience is very clear, whereas it is different in sleep. The disciple said, can we put it that in sleep there is no unhappiness nor happiness? That is, the experience is negative, not positive? The Maharshi replies, but the recollection is positive. I slept happily, says the man. So there must be the experience of happiness in sleep. The disciple asked, does bliss consist only in the absence of unhappiness, or is it anything positive? The Maharshi responds, it is positive. Loss of unhappiness and rise of happiness are simultaneous. The disciple asked, can it be that the recollection of happiness in sleep is not clear, and so there is no harapalation, etc.? And the Maharshi answers, the bliss of Samadhi is a perfectly clear experience, and its recollection also is similar, but the experience of sleep is otherwise. Is samadhi a bodily state? If it is a bodily state, why then the symptoms described can be noticed and then a diagnosis can be made, yes or no, someone is in samadhi. But in samadhi itself, is there a body? Indeed, the body and its attributes constitute a reliable gauge of one's spiritual experience. Initially, the Maharshi said, all these are symptoms of exceedingly subtle modes of mind. Without duality, they cannot remain. Samadhi is perfect peace where these cannot find place. After emerging from samadhi, the remembrance of the state gives rise to these symptoms. In Bhakti Marga, these are the precursors to samadhi. So in non-duality, such symptoms cannot occur. Yet is non-duality to be measured bodily? Later he said in the same answer, I had the same experience when I was staying in Virupaksha cave, referring to irrepressible tears. Did Sri Bhagavan give up his non-duality while in Virupaksha cave? It is absurd, of course not. So how are we to reconcile the statements? If one's being is bodiless, and that stands solely as one's identity, these symptoms, the body itself, and even the whole world do not occur. Samadhi is spoken of as temporary absorption in the Supreme. Unless it is sahaja samadhi, in which case it is eternal, for it is innate, which is what the word sahaja means. What has been dissolved in order to get such absorption? Identification as an individual with the mind and with the body. How would it be possible to measure that by physical signs? If one is concerned with those things, oh, do I have a sobbing voice? Do I have tears? Am I undergoing horripilation? Goosebumps? Then one is certainly not in samadhi, also preoccupied. If one is immersed in samadhi, these things don't find a place there, nor does anything else objective. Remain as the bodiless, which is absolute being. This you truly are, and then such doubts as these cannot arise. In his answers, the Maharshi had stated, Samadhi means sleep in waking state. Jagrat, sleep, waking, Sushupti, deep sleep. Bliss is overpowering, and the experience is very clear, whereas it is different in sleep. What is this waking deep sleep? What is meant by this? Does it mean that somehow we get the waking state and the deep sleep state to be jammed together? And if so, who would be in charge of it, the waking one or the sleeping one? But deep sleep is the absorption in one's existence, as declared by the Chandogya Upanishad, in which individuality dissolves, and there's no memory of such. If you can dissolve the individuality and attendant concepts by being absorbed, your sense of identity being absorbed in formless existence, such as waking deep sleep. It is very clear, unlike sleep. And even a temporary experience of it in the course of practice remains very clear, even when one thinks about it later. The essence of that experience is the unformed consciousness, existence aware of itself. The disciple then asked, can we put it that in sleep there is no unhappiness nor happiness? That is, the experience is negative, not positive. But the Maharshi replies, but the recollection is positive. I slept happily, says the man, so there must be the experience of happiness in sleep. Existence consciousness is bliss. Just as existence is not merely the negation of all else, though such negation may be instrumental in the course of practice, the existence itself is not merely a negation, but is quite real. Likewise with bliss or happiness. It is not merely a negation of the causes of suffering, but it is the solid, substantial remainder after those causes have been dissolved. Such is experienced in sleep. Such happiness is experienced in Samadhi. Such happiness is one's true nature. The disciple had then asked, does bliss consist only in the absence of unhappiness, or is it anything positive? The Maharshi replies, it is positive. Loss of unhappiness and rise of happiness are simultaneous. Again, happiness is quite real, just as your existence is. As soon as the unreal is removed from its superimposition upon the real, the reality shines forth without a moment's delay. It is not newly created, but being ever existent is already there. It is the same with happiness or bliss. The moment the illusory causes of suffering are removed, the reality of the ever-present happiness is there, shining forth without obstruction. February 28, 1937. His Highness the Maharaja of Mysore had a private interview with Sri Bhagavan in the newly built bathroom from 9:15 to 9:30 a.m. His Highness saluted Sri Bhagavan, placing his head on Sri Bhagavan's feet, and said, I have read Sri Bhagavan's life and long had a desire to meet him. But my circumstances are such that intentions of this kind cannot easily be carried into effect. Nor can I stay here as other disciples can, considering all my limitations. While I remain here for about 15 minutes, I shall now pray only for thy grace. On departure, His Highness again saluted Sri Bhagavan as before, and left after presenting 2 fine shawls and some money to the office. Rich or poor, royalty or peasant, all rely on and stand in need of grace. That grace is always present, but one's prayers for it makes one keenly aware of it. March 13th, 1937. His Highness the Maharaja of Travancore had an interview from 4:30 p.m. to 5:15 p.m. Their Highness the Maharaja and the Maharani of Travancore, who arrived at Tiruvannamalai by the 8 o'clock train, visited the ashram at 4:15 p.m. The public were excluded from the hall where Bhagavan sat. Even devotees who were daily visiting the hall were by a sad mistake excluded from the interview. The royal party were introduced to Sri Bhagavan by retired district magistrate, 2 aides-de-camp, private secretary to His Highness the Maharaja, some officials of the Travancore state, and an advocate of Mylapore were present. The discussion started by the district magistrate went on about manas, mind, concentration, realization, purpose of creation, etc. Her Highness put some questions expressing her doubts, and they were all explained by Sri Bhagavan. His Highness the Maharaja also took part in the discussion. The whole conversation was in Tamil and Malayalam. During the visit of the royal family of Travancore, Her Highness appeared very cultured and vivacious and conversant with Malayalam, Tamil, and English. Most of the questions were put by Her Highness. One of the questions was, "What is the purpose of creation?" Sri Bhagavan replied, "It is to give rise to this question. Investigate the answer to this question and finally abide in the Supreme, or rather the primal source of all, including the Self. The investigation will resolve itself into one of quest for the Self, and cease only after the non-self is sifted away and the Self realized in its purity and glory." The disciple asked, "How is the investigation to start?" The Maharshi replied, "The Self is plain to all, and the starting also equally plain." The disciple asked, "What is the starting point for one in my stage of development?" The Maharshi replied, "Each one has some method of upasana or japa. If that is pursued in all sincerity, with due perseverance, it will automatically lead to the investigation of the Self." The writer of these notes was not present, and the above was gathered from one of the attendants of Sri Maharshi. What is the purpose of all this? That's her question. What is the purpose of creation? The Maharshi commences his response by saying it is to give rise to this question. The purpose of the creation is being fulfilled when it prompts one to ask what its purpose is. Asking why, determining its purpose, will lead one to who? Investigating one's own being. Investigate the answer to this question, and finally abide in the supreme, or rather the primal source of all. What is the original source of all this? The answer lies in the consciousness of the one who knows it. What starts off as an investigation into the reason for all this, seeking its source, resolves itself into one of quest for the self. And how is such quest for the self carried out? By sifting the non-self from the self. Thus the self is realized in its purity, that is unmixed with anything else, and its glory. Its blissful, infinite sacredness. The question was, how is this investigation to start? Sri Bhagavan replied, the self is plain to all, and the starting also equally plain. What could be more plain or self-evident than existence? Start with that. your existence. If you start with that, you will end with that existence. Just as to commence, there is no one who is not aware of his own existence. Likewise, in the end, there is found to be no non-knower of the self. Existence is self-known. In response to her further question, Sri Bhagavan had said, each one has some method of vipassana. Vipassana means devout meditation, or japa, repetition of mantra. If that is pursued in all sincerity with due perseverance, it will automatically lead to the investigation of the self. Such practices tend to turn the mind in a sattvic direction. Sattva is inclined then toward the knowledge of the self. Such a mind made pure and introspective turns further inward and begins to investigate one's own nature. Upon investigating one's own nature, well, the result is a foregone conclusion. March 21st, 1937. A middle-aged Canarese visitor asked about akarma, actionless act. The Maharshi replied in one sentence, whatever one does after the ego has vanished is akarma, actionless act. Whatever one does after the ego has vanished is actionless act. With the ego gone, there is no thing as action. With the ego gone, there is no such thing as the result of action. Find out how you are eyeless, and of course bodiless, and you discover that you never do anything. One who is egoless has accomplished all that need be accomplished. All his actions are non-binding. And in his own experience, he remains ever still. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana.